Hello friends, today's topic of discussion is Hindi cinema and religious tourism, and in the earlier lectures on Hindi cinema and religious tourism we talked about the various films which are responsible for, in a way, indirectly in terms of increasing the tourism as well. We also talked about the various regions, that over a period of time how these regions they grew because of the kind of incentives which were being given to them by the government. And in the recent times we have seen that various state governments, they have in a way given some kind of incentives to the filmmakers when they are making films in their regions, and because of which we find that so many filmmakers they have gone to different regions. UP we talked about in the last lecture about the Uttar Pradesh, and how the kind of incentives given by the Uttar Pradesh government also led to so many filmmakers visiting these places, and how over a period of time tourism in that particular region has also increased. And we were talking about Shirdi Ke Sai Baba, which was made in 1977 as one of the films which played an important role in terms of popularizing Sai Baba and his cult. In that sense, we find that when these filmmakers they reach these regions, and how the film actors and actresses, when they were being shown on the screen, they were also revered by the masses. Many times they felt that these were the real gods and goddesses, because these were the people they acted in those particular films and TV series. And it was also there in the context of the TV series like Ramayana and Mahabharat, where we find that how the actors and actresses, those who worked in these serials, they were appreciated and admired by the masses, and when they saw them not on the screen but directly, then they were ready to pay their respects to them in that sense. And we find that during this time, when these kinds of shrines which were being depicted in these films, they helped in terms of increasing the visitors numbers. And we find that over a period of time, the number of when we talk about Shirdi Ke Sai Baba for that matter, and the kind of data which has been given, where we find that Shri Sai Baba Sansthan Trust SSST on an average talks about 25,000 visitors or devotees visiting the Shirdi village every day to see Shirdi Sai Baba. So that was the initial period, and then we find that over a period of time these kinds of numbers they grew when this kind of a cult developed. And when we talk about the officials of Shri Sai Baba Sansthan Trust, they in a way provide some kind of figures they have given, and how since December 23, 2022, more than 1 lakh visitors have visited these places. And they have also given data of the later times, where they have suggested that 1.5 lakh devotees they visit the temples every day on December 25 and 26, 2022. So this is a data which is an older data, and over a period of time we see that the numbers they have increased over a period of time. And apart from Shirdi, we see that there are other places like Banaras, for example, which is known as Kashi and Varanasi, and it is a vibrant center of Indian culture, religious traditions and spiritual consciousness. And the religious grandeur of this city, the eternity of the holy ghats, the divinity of Ganga Arati, and the concept of salvation have attracted not only pilgrims but also filmmakers. So we find that how Kashi or Banaras or Varanasi, whatever name with which you call the city, and the city has a very vibrant center in the framework of the culture which is there, and a lot of really spiritual consciousness is also attributed to the city, and people from different places they have visited this particular city, where we find that the holy ghats they are being revered, and the divinity of the Ganga Aarti has also been seen by the visitors when they see the Aarti in the evening on the Ganga Ghats. And so we find this idea of salvation which is also attached when Kashi is a very religious place, and how this idea of salvation is also attached in terms of visiting Kashi. And when people they have seen Kashi on screen, and then they themselves have felt some kind of a cultural journey. And we find the when you talk about that how city is being depicted on the celluloid, and it has also in a way led to increase in the religious tourism. And we find that Kashi definitely is an important city, in so many films they have been made on Kashi, and how because of these kinds of filmmakers we find that there is an interest among the youth as well in terms of visiting these places. And we find that some of the filmmakers, one of the filmmakers and film script writers, Neeraj Pathak, who had an interview with me, and in that particular interview Neeraj Pathak talked about that he conveyed that in terms of quoting him, I would like to say that we have become very aware in this regard over the last few years, and we are conscious of this. I was listening to an interview on Aaj Tak, which stated that on that day 7 crore people had come to Kashi Vishwanath. It had now become a more preferred place than Goa. Now think Goa was a place where people used to go to visit earlier, but now people are visiting Kashi, so something has changed. I realize there has been an awareness among the youth about religion. I would say that there is a huge contribution from some of our leaders in this regard. Our PM has visited Kedarnath and other religious places and said that if we improve the infrastructure and transport of religious places, the economy would grow, tourism will increase, everyone wants to see the 12 Jyotirlingas, Kedarnath, Badrinath, Kashi, etc. And if those places are improved and made better, more people will go there. This will boost the economy. That is the reason for more tourism, and its effect is now clearly visible. To substantiate my argument, I would say that in today's era, the most expensive film being made is Ramayana, and it has a lot to do with the opening of the Ram temple in Ayodhya. So we find that this kind of a statement by one of the filmmakers and a script writer, and he talked about this particular city. He in a way compared this particular city with Goa, and how over a period of time we find that tourism has increased in this particular city. And he also talks in that particular framework of how it will boost the economy, and how in that sense we find that there is more tourism. And he talks in that particular framework that nowadays films, they are being based on religious themes, and he talks about Ramayana for that matter, that one of the most expensive films which is going to be made now is Ramayana. And many of the popular film stars of today's time, they are going to act in it. So there is some kind of an attachment with regard to these kinds of themes, and it has got to do with the way we are able to in a way project these kinds of images on the screen, because there is a lot of access to cinema on various kinds of channels, and how cinema can be viewed nowadays on the mobile phones because of so many OTT platforms, that earlier people, they used to go to cinema halls. Even now they are going to cinema halls, but the way they can also access films on their mobile has definitely played an important role in that sense, and because of which we find that more and more people, they are able to access more material on the OTT platforms and mobile while they are traveling, or for that matter in their leisure time, because going to a cinema hall is not only a costly affair, but also you need a lot of time, maybe an entire day or half a day to watch a film. So we find that when you talk about these kinds of films which are catering to an audience and so many other audiences for which it is not being targeted as well, they are also watching it. And we see that Banaras, a mystic love story which was made in 2006, how it used the mystical backdrop of the Ghats to depict the question of spiritual love and reincarnation. Then again another film was Mukti Bhavan, which deeply depicted the ultimate desire for the salvation and presented death as a search for peace. So we find that these kinds of philosophical and spiritual questions which are talking about life and death, and how Banaras as a city which has this kind of a mystical backdrop, and people, they go to this particular city for the idea of salivation which is attached, and the films which are talking about these kinds of aspects, when they are being viewed by the audience, then they also want to visit these places. And we find that an article published in Times of India, a travel guide, stated that after the release of the film Mukti Bhavan, he started receiving calls from the several travel agencies, and these calls were about tourists wanting to include the shooting locations of the films in their itinerary. So we find that how when these kinds of places they are shown in films, and they themselves become tourist places, that how some kind of a board or some is also being placed in this on that particular site or place, where it is being suggested that or communicated that this particular film was also shot here. And there are other kinds of activities which are happening. For example, children, they are collecting coins in Ganga, and this was being shown in this particular film Mukti Bhavan. And Masan again was an important film which was talking about Banaras, and it depicted the social reality of the Ghats and portrayed love, sin and reincarnation in a humanistic way. So, and it also talked about the idea of social inequality which is there in the society. So, we find the backdrop of the film with regard to the social reality, and at the same time the idea of social inequality was also being talked about in this particular film. Apart from that, when you talk about Banaras, the other films like Mohalla C, which expose the ironies of religious hypocrisy and the commercialization of tourism, and Ghatak, which was made in 1996, used Banaras as a backdrop to tell the story of the struggle for social justice. So, we find that Banaras, the way it has been shown in films and the way how masses they in a way accepted or received the portrayal of Banaras in the films. And Mohalla C basically talks about how tourism has a lot of commercial, the way tourism has been commercialized. So, this commercialization of tourism is also some kind of a threat to the religious and the cultural kind of a significance which a particular place has, and how tourists we find that they are not able to connect with the spiritual significance or the religious significance of that place many a times, and it also creates some kind of issues as well. And we find that Ranjana was another film in 2013 which was depicting the streets and the festivals of Banaras, and how they were able to experience the vibrant atmosphere of the city. And according to the data, if we see, then the Banaras received 8 crores 54 lakh 73,633 visitors in the year 2023, and which puts it far ahead of other destinations in the country. So, we see that the way these films, when they were being shown to the audience, and how audience in a way took these films or received these films, and over a period of time the numbers, those who were visiting these particular places, it also got increased. So, we have to in a way see that films definitely are in a way contributing in that sense, and how domestic religious tourism is also increasing because of these kinds of depictions and portrayals. Apart from the feature films and apart from the television serials which are there, we also find the documentaries like The Eternal City and The Children of the Pyre. They expose the deep reality of Banaras, the Christian tradition and the social aspects on the world stage, and how the films, they in a way asked the audience to introspect and allowed them to see the religious image of Banaras from a new perspective. So, we find that when these kinds of films, they are being made, and how audience also is receiving them in their own way, and they also want to explore the reality through their own eyes. And we see that how these kinds of works of arts, they establish Banaras as not just a pilgrimage site, but as a cultural and philosophical experience as well. And definitely the moving images, they have provided some kind of a new dimension to the image of Banaras, not only nationally but internationally as well. and how the city remains a living symbol of devotion, sensitivity and creativity as well. So, we find that how cinema in a way has not only strengthened the roots of faith and belief in Indian society, but has also played an important role in the expansion of religious tourism, and how films they portray the ancient temples, pilgrimage sites, spiritual places for the audience in a dramatic and emotional form, thereby making them very lively. And we find that these places they no longer in a way attract the devotees, but also a center of attraction for the common tourists as well. And we find that the cultural consciousness of the country has also increased through these religious films. And we also find that the way the music, dialogues and the plots which are used in the film, they inspire the audience to visit these places which they had only read earlier or heard only in Katha or Puranas. And so we in a way see that how religious cinema also inculcates devotion and reverence and promotes the culture of travel and pilgrimage among the masses, and because of which we find that how economy also benefits and there is increase in religious tourism. And we also find that many times when more and more people they are visiting the pilgrimage sites, new employment opportunities also arise, income opportunities also arise in various businesses of hotels and local transport, catering and handicrafts, because the local products which are made in that particular region, they are also being bought by the tourist, and especially some kind of crafts are always available in the tourist cities. And we, because of which we find that the income generating opportunities for the local masses, they also increase, and how the local transport which is being provided to the tourists also in a way provides some kind of a thrust to the local transport industry. And we find that how the impact of the religious cinema is not only limited to the cultural or the religious sphere, but its economic aspect is equally important, and how the government and the various tourism departments they give priority to the conservation and the development of the religious places also happens. And we find that how various kinds of plans by the government and by the trust of these particular places like Ayodhya, Kashi and Mathura, the way they can be developed as tourist hubs, in which the portrayals of Hindi films have been a source of stimulus in that way. And apart from that, we find that various TV series and documentaries they have also contributed in that sense, where we find that how religious tourism has also increased. And some kind of ideas or challenges which we see is that how when excessive commercialization of the pilgrimage sites take place, so their spiritual dignity is also being compromised. These kinds of challenges and questions they have also been raised, and environmental issues like pollution and garbage they are also happening because of the increased influx of the crowds in these regions. So, some kind of balance is to be maintained between the religious tourism and spirituality, so that the original spirit and the cultural dignity of these places can also be protected. So, some kind of responsibility with the tourists as well, that when they visit these places, so from the environmental point of view, from the point of view of conservation, they are able to behave responsibly, and from the point of view of government as well, that they in a way give some kind of specific funds for the environmental conservation of these particular places. So, some kind of balance is required, that tourism also in a way prospers, but at the same time the kind of environment of these particular places is also not polluted. And we find that how Hindi religious cinema has kept faith and devotion alive in the Indian society, but has also played an important role in bringing positive changes in the culture and economic sectors through religious tourism. And we find that how possibly cinema will play an important role in that context, where it will strengthen the triangle of faith, culture and tourism. And one of the important aspects in the recent times with regard to one of the important Mela which is there in India, which is the Kumbh Mela, and films they also have some kind of connection with Kumbh Melas. If you see films of earlier times, various films of lost and found stories, where we find that two brothers or some other family member, they were lost in the Kumbh Melas. So people were very well aware about the Kumbh Melas. They had heard about the Kumbh Melas in the various kinds of films which were made in 1970s and 80s. And over a period of time, we see that Kumbh Mela, for the matter, specifically this year, we find that some kind of Mahakumbh was seen after 144 years. And when you talk about the background of the Kumbh Mela, that how it was rooted in the Hindu mythology, and over a period of time, we find because of the Samudra Manthan, and how the celestial battle which took place between the demons and the gods, and we find the drops of the nectar fell at the 4 locations: Haridwar, Prayagraj, Nasik and Ujjain, and how these are the places which are in a way hosting, as you can see on the screen, the Kumbh Mela, and how we find that it is a remarkable example of how tradition and modernity they can coexist harmoniously. And as I told you, the cinematic connection, lost brothers and lost family members in Kumbh Mela, that is one aspect which is associated in the context, because we find that it was a huge congregation where so many people came, and that was a time when you did not have those kinds of modern technologies where we could in a way manage such a huge event. But nowadays, when we find that in the present Kumbh Mela 66 crore people they visited, and the kind of arrangements they were being made, and how the government definitely played an important role, and at the same time we find that how technology was also important in that context, and how technology provided all sorts of support to the government in that sense. And we find that it was a rare event this time, and how because of it so many people they visited, not only from India, so many foreign tourists they also came to India to visit this particular Mela. And it had some kind of ancient connection, as I told you, because it was rooted in the Samudra Manthan, and thereafter in ancient times it has been mentioned in the various by the various dynasties, and how we find that because of this kind of a mention, and a lot of spiritual cleansing and self enlightenment ideas, they are also associated with this Kumbh tradition or Kumbh Mela. And we find that how some kind of a spectacle of faith, unity and tradition they happen in it, and how religious spiritual activities they are being conducted during this time, and how Triveni Sangam, where the sacred rituals at the confluence of Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati rivers, and how the idea of royal dip or the Shahi Snan was there. So many things which were there in terms of culture, rituals, and how so many akharas they came, Naga sadhus came, and we find that over a period of time in that context, so many people, because it was considerably for around 45 days, and it was talking about the cultural vibrancy of that particular region. And we find that apart from this Mela, there were other historical landmarks there: Ashok Pillar in the University of Allahabad, Hanuman Mandir and Alopi Devi Mandir. All these kinds of ancient temples, they are there, located there, and people they visited these places as well when they went, and many of them they were also shown in some of the films as well. And so when we tend to understand Hindi cinema and religious tourism, we find that definitely Hindi cinema has provided some kind of a support to the religious tourism, and in the various films from yesteryears, and we find that how films they have tried to show the culture and the kind of significance of that particular religious place, and the role of the government has definitely helped in that, in terms of managing the kind of crowds which are visiting these places, and the faith of the masses as well. And we also see that some kind of a balance has to be created where we find that it may not lead to any kind of environmental degradation, and the tourists, they should also behave responsibly in terms of maintaining the environmental balance, and at the same time behaving responsibly in terms of respecting the religious and spiritual connection of that particular place. So, with this I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.